and welcome back to today. We are taking a look at the now complete display I was working on for the Star Wars Treadspeeder. If you saw the other videos on this, you'll know this was just a basic kid's toy that I picked up for a £5, which I wanted to originally customize for Black Series figures, but the scale was completely off, so I ended up making this as a standalone display piece. With the other videos, you would have seen that I did the base and then customized this, and now it's all finished. And now that it's finished, I thought I'd take a final look at it before placing it on my shelf for display purposes. So, as you would have seen in the other videos, this base was created out of a foam board. Then I used some molding gel, I think it was called, which I then top coated with sand before painting it, and I've done some various color layers on the sand just to give it some depth and look. So there's some darker tones on a couple of the rocks pieces. Then for the speeder itself, I left the base coats as they were, but I did a full customization. So I gave some black washes to bring out all of the detailing, and then I did some layering of paints before doing some dry brushes to add scuffs and dirt and everything else. The treads were a mixture of sand and paint to fill in and make it look a little more realistic as it picks up the dirt and sand moving along the desert. The troopers as well were dusted up. Once that was all done, what I've done is I've essentially glued everything down. So if you saw the previous videos, you know I was waiting some acrylic dowels, which I now had. So I took that dowel, I cut it down to size just by scoring along the dowel with a Stanley knife and then snapping it at the weak point. I pushed that through the board, used some hot glue to hold it into place, and used some super glue just to give it its rigidity. Once that was dry, I scored away the excess hot glue, so this now sits flat on the surface. I glued the troopers to the speeder, so you can see that they are completely glued on nice and tight. I also glued their arms so they won't move about. The jet trooper is glued at the legs, and there is a little bit of glue at the base to keep him in place. The stormtrooper himself is glued at the arms and glued at the feet to keep his feet in the treads, or mostly in the treads. Sadly, that hasn't worked quite as well as I had hoped, but it's not too bad. I've also glued them at their tops of their arms so they can't move, as I mentioned, and I've glued the weapon into place. I also glued the Stormtrooper's blaster to the tread bite. There is a notch which this plugged into, so I've just put the super glue in there and held it into place with that. With them secured to the speeder, the exploding play feature was essentially all glued down by gluing this seat and gluing this into place, so none of this will now fire. And it's all essentially just a solid piece. I glued the speeder to the dowel at the base just so that there is a little lift on the ground. Basically what I wanted was the Treadspeeder's footwells to be lifted off the ground, because they wouldn't be dragging along the dirt, they would be lifted up and off. So that's essentially all the dowel is for, is just to give a little levity to the footwells, which you can now see. Otherwise, the speeder is glued underneath the treads to the sand. Originally, I was going to have this speeding along straight. However, to utilize more of the space, I've brought it forward a little bit more and turned it. So it almost looks like the bike is missing the rock and is swerving slightly. I don't know how well it shows up on camera, but you can see some tread scoring. So when this was still wet, I ran the speeder along it and pushed it through to make it look like the Treadspeeder had kicked up and pushed the sand along. This was the first time for me doing a project like this. I've done customization stuff before, mostly for my son. I did Captain America recently, and I've done a Halo Warthog and some red paint and things like that for him. But this was the first time I've done a project where I essentially made a solid display piece. This was certainly the first time I've ever done a base like this, and I wasn't sure how it was going to turn out. I was experimenting the entire time, and I was really happy with how this has turned out. Given this is the first time I've done something quite like this, I was actually really impressed with how it did turn out. I do feel that this makes a really nice display piece to have in my collection. It's something different. It's not something you can go out and buy. It's got some real depth and textures to it. And I think if you had someone like Hasbro doing something like this, you certainly wouldn't have the textures in the way that this does. So I really couldn't be happier with this. I am so pleased with how it turned out, which is good because I've never done anything like this, and it now has given me the confidence to go and do some other projects I've been wanting to do. The main one is I want to create a diorama display piece for Stingray using this, and then eventually some epoxy resin for the ocean. But that's another project. Thank you for watching this video. If you've seen the others in this series, I hope you enjoyed the series and following along with me. I certainly enjoyed doing this project. And as I said, it's given me the confidence to go out and do some other projects and experiment on how I do said projects. With the Stingray one, I don't intend on doing the base the same way I've done this one. It'll be something similar, but I'm actually going to try experimenting with polyfiller for plasterboards. I've never seen anyone use it before, so I don't know how it's going to turn out, but it was £1 and I thought, you know what, for £1 I can have some fun experimenting, and if it doesn't work, I haven't lost anything, and I've learned that it doesn't work, and if it works, then hey, I've found a cheap way of doing it going forward. But that's another project for another time. So thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Until next time, stay safe, and may the Force be with you.